They hunted the baby for being human, but a dragon became her fiercest guardian. Beginning, the skies of Zarthol Prime never saw the warmth of the sun. It was a world wrapped in twilight, bathed in the constant silver glow of its shattered moon. Great spires of obsidian jutted from its valleys, and in their shadows lived the Draken, a proud, scaled race of ancient reptilian beings who had once ruled not only this planet, but half the star cluster around it. But even empires collapse. The Draken had lost their war with the Federated Species Council, a coalition of aliens who hated nothing more than the resurgence of any single dominant race. The Council feared tyrants, feared kings, feared dragons above all. Humans were rare in this corner of the galaxy. Their fleets had been scattered, their colonies burned. Most who survived were sold into servitude or executed as instigators of chaos. Humanity, to the Council, was too adaptable, too unpredictable, a species that, if given a chance, could rival even the Draken in power. And so when the Council's patrol ship found the wreck of a smuggler's vessel on the outskirts of Zarthol Prime, the discovery was enough to ignite dread across their network. Inside, among the wreckage, lay a living infant, human. Council Command issued a decree, eradicate it. The child was a threat not because of what it was now, but what it might become. But as the war hunters descended to the planet, they did not expect that the Draken would interfere. Least of all one broken, wingless dragon who had long since been cast aside by his own kind. Middle, Caleb had been called many things. Coward, cripple, disgrace. Once, he had been a warlord of the skies, his wings slicing the thin atmosphere as he commanded the flames of 1,000 battles. But after the Council's victory decades ago, his wings had been seared with plasma fire and torn apart. He could no longer fly. The Draken were a species that revered strength above all else. A dragon that could not soar was no dragon. Caleb had been exiled to the wastes, condemned to live out his life in solitude among the ruins of broken towers. It was there, among cracked stone and silence, that he first heard the crying. At first, he thought it was an echo from his dreams, a sound of life he had not heard in years. But as the night stretched, he followed the sound, and there, wrapped in a shredded thermal blanket, lay a small creature. Fragile, soft-skinned, a face with no scales, no claws. Its tiny eyes blinked up at him, and it wailed again. A human child. Kalitha's chest rumbled with confusion. He knew what the Council decreed. He knew what his own kin would say if they saw him cradle the infant. Yet something deeper moved in him. Something old, perhaps even older than the Draken themselves. The infant clutched his talon with startling strength. "She does not fear me," he muttered in disbelief. And from that night on, Caleb became her guardian. He hunted the ash plains for food, brought her warmth with the embers of his own breath. He built a nest of stone and cloth to keep her safe from the cold winds. As the months passed, he grew skilled at understanding her cries, whether from hunger, discomfort, or loneliness. He named her Lyra. For the first time since his exile, Caleb felt purpose. But fate does not allow peace long. Scouts came first. Thin insectoid creatures with tracking eyes that glowed crimson. They flew on wings of steel, sniffing through the ruins. Caleb watched them from the shadows, clutching Lyra against his chest. "They hunt you," he whispered to her as she cooed softly. "For what crime? For daring to exist?" When one of the insectoid scouts crept too close, Kalitha's instincts took over. With a burst of fire, he incinerated it, shielding Lyra from the blast. The others fled, but Caleb knew what that meant. They would return. And they did. The Council's warship descended days later, carrying squads of enforcers, sleek, armored figures with energy rifles and net launchers. They swept through the ruins, searching, burning. Caleb had Lyra deep within a cavern, warding the entrance with flame-scorched stone. Then he turned to face them. "You cannot have her," he growled as the first squad approached. The lead enforcer's voice buzzed from behind its mask. "Step aside, dragon. That life form is forbidden. A human child will never rise again among the stars." Caleb bared his teeth, his eyes burning. "You fear her not because of what she is, but because of what she will become." He unleashed his fire. The battle shook the ruins. Plasma bolts hissed past his scales, searing flesh, but Caleb endured. His claws tore through armor. His tail sent enemies crashing into walls. He fought not as the cripple they believed him to be, but as the dragon he once was. Yet even he could not stand against endless waves. A blast struck his chest, throwing him to the ground. He gasped, blood hissing against a cracked stone. The enforcers advanced, ready to end him, then finish the child. But a sound broke through the chaos. A cry. Lyra's cry. It pierced through smoke and fire, a small, fragile sound, but to Caliph, it was thunder. His body roared with strength he thought long lost. He rose, fire blazing from his throat, and roared not at their throats, but at their knees. The shock wave of his bellows shattered the ground, buckling the enforcers' legs, toppling them like brittle reeds. He did not seek to kill, but to protect, to break their will. The soldiers stumbled back in disbelief. Impossible, he was broken. Caliph loomed above them, eyes burning like suns. Broken? No, I am reborn. And she, he gestured toward the hidden cavern where Lyra's cries still echoed, she is mine to protect. The enforcers retreated, but Caliph knew this was only the beginning. The council would not stop. They never stopped. Days turned to weeks. Lyra grew stronger, babbling, crawling, laughing. The sound of her joy became Caliph's armor, his strength. But word had spread beyond the council. Other Draken began to whisper. Some mocked him for guarding a human. But others remembered what it meant to have purpose, to fight for something greater than conquest. A handful came to him, outcasts, rogues, dragons who had lost their families in the wars. They saw Lyra not as a threat, but as hope. She is small, said an old-scale matron, her voice like grinding stone. But so were we once. Together, they formed a hidden enclave, raising walls of obsidian around the cavern, warding it with flame. For the first time in centuries, the Draken were united not by war, but by protection. And Lyra grew in the center of it all, her tiny hands reaching for scales, her laughter echoing to the ruins of a fallen empire. Ending. The council struck one final time. They came not with scouts or squads, but with an armada, great ships that blotted out the twilight sky, their cannons ready to scour the surface. This time, their commander broadcasted, we will burn this world clean. No human, no dragon, no memory of either shall remain. The Draken enclave bristled, ready to die. Caliph stood at their front, Lyra nestled against his chest. He gazed at her, his heart heavy. Little star, I may not survive this. But know this, your life is worth more than mine, more than all of ours. For in you lies the proof that the council's fear is true, that humanity will rise again. As the first barrage fell, Caliph spread his ruined wings wide, not to fly but to shield. The blast struck, fire and plasma, engulfing him. He roared, his body breaking, but still he stood. And then, something impossible happened. Lyra, barely more than a toddler, reached out her tiny hands. The air shimmered. Energy rippled outward, bending the flames away, warping the plasma bolts mid-air. The council's weapons turned aside, crashing harmlessly into the wastelands. The armada faltered. She wields it, Caliph gasped, his eyes wide, the power they feared. The child's eyes glowed faintly, not with the rage of destruction, but with the innocence of protection. She clung to Caliph's scales, shielding not only him, but the enclave, the Draken, the very ruins themselves. For the first time, the council knew fear. Dragons rose into the sky, broken wings mended by hope, their roars echoing with Lyra's light. The armada faltered under fire and flame, and at last they fled. When silence fell again, Caliph lay battered but alive. He looked at the child, who smiled at him as if nothing had happened. You are not just human, he whispered. You are the bridge between what was and what will be. The Draken gathered around, their eyes shining. In that moment, they did not see her as prey. They saw her as kin. And Caliph, the dragon who had been cast aside, the cripple who could not fly, became known throughout the stars as the guardian of Lyra, not for his fire, not for his claws, but because when the galaxy hunted her for being human, he had chosen not to abandon her, and in return